I don't want you to see all my cables over there. All right. Tavistock Institute. Welcome to Book Club. Chapter 2, Tavistock and the Unholy Alliance. Let me get comfy. The religious and mystical dimensions of the story of Tavistock are central to any study of the U.S. government's post-war interests and how psychology and parapsychology could benefit the intelligence agencies. It was Tavistock and the cabal of scientists who were the first to bring the potential uses of paranormal abilities in military applications, as well as the first in developing chemical substances that would stimulate psychic abilities. This cabal included men such as Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, head of CIA's Technical Services Staff, with shadowy connections both to Operation Paperclip on the one side and to the Kennedy assassination on the other. As Peter Levenda explains in Sinister Forces, quote, swirling about the feet and hands of the Kennedy assassination was a sticky fog of occultists, wandering bishops and American intelligences and Nazi scientists. All were a handshake or two away from JFK's alleged assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. They were all taking the ghost's practical ritual magic. They were all talking to ghosts, practicing ritual magic, holding hands around the seance table, or sacrificing chickens in New Orleans apartments. And in some cases, they were also members of America's ruling elite. I wonder if chicken is code for something else. The wealthiest and best connected families in the country. The CIA was not the first organization to confront the task of probing the human mind. Operations Bluebird, Artichoke, and MK Ultra were designed to respond to similar practices of the Soviet Union and China. What was termed in the popular press brainwashing. The show trials of Cardinal Mindszenty of Hungary were more evident that the communists had managed to develop a technique for altering consciousness in their political prisoners. American GIs returning from captivity in Korea were another example, that there might be a mysterious Oriental method to cloud men's minds, both frightened and excited, the men of the CIA. In order quickly to learn as much as possible, they assigned psychiatrists, scientists, and medical professionals to the task of finding out how the mind, and specifically memory, works. In doing so, they came across occultist practices, demonstrations of psychic abilities, and the mind control techniques of yogis, shamans, and witch doctors. Clearly, this was a realm of mind control that was well worth pursuing, and which gave birth to some of the strangest projects ever funded by the U.S. government. It was in combination with the works of Lewin, Trist, and Reese at Tavistock that these drugs, spiritual techniques, and laboratory tests opened a Pandora's box of suffering, violence, and perhaps even redemption through transformation. The black box of consciousness. In this, Tavistock, the world's premier brainwashing institute, was unwittingly following the steps of magicians, sorcerers, gurus, and cultists the world over. However, there was one difference. Without meaning, there is no context of the experience. There is no way to integrate the material into one's psychological makeup. Tavistock's director, Brigadier General John Rawlings Reese, wasn't interested in meaning. Neither was Lewin or Trist or Adorno. That wasn't their job. Their task was to open up the mind too fast and easy manipulation, not to promote spiritual or psychic integration, or what Jung calls individuation. Their job was to create assassins, turn agents, to interrogate prisoners, obtain information, and manipulate consciousness. Saving souls was for the priests. The CIA and the satanic cults, the mythology of the late 20th century, is surprisingly coherent, even though the masks of change from case to case, from victim to alleged victim. The CIA, of course, does exist. Their mind control programs, from Bluebird to Artichoke to MKUltra, are a matter of public record. Their history of political assassinations and the overthrow of various foreign governments are also a matter of record. Satanic cults, or perhaps we should qualify that and say occult secret societies, also exist and are a matter of public record. Their attempt to contact higher spirits through arcane rituals are also well documented and well known. Add all of this to espionage activities, and you have the perfect fruit salad of paranoia, power, and prestige. Mixing secret government work with secret rituals and the manipulation of those sinister forces we have been looking at. The secret hands, the secret handshake of the cult, and the secret code of the intelligence agencies, they both evoke the power of relationship that is beyond the reach of ordinary human beings. Intelligence offers, no, Intelligence officers and cultists have a lot in common. Secrecy is a way of life for both the spy and the sorcerer. They both use codes and code names. They both pretend to have access to mysteries not available to the general public. They both claim to be able to influence events at a distance with their special abilities and power. They both specialize in the manipulation of reality. Both are aware that things are not always what they seem to be, and they are both ruthless and often immoral in the pursuit of their goals. And when one can so easily manipulate the perception of reality, one eventually comes to the realization that truth itself is a malleable thing. So it was only natural that the cultist and the spy would gravitate towards each other and would try to learn from each other. This control of reality, of the perception of reality, and the creation of consensus reality is a powerful political tool and has been since ancient times, when the proverbial sorceress could appear to create solar eclipses by simply knowing when one would occur and act accordingly. To control and manipulate the reality of the masses, one uses what is known as psychological warfare. And it is but one step from controlling a person's perception of reality to getting that person to act on it. The CIA and Tavistock were opening a Pandora's box of demonic forces, the black box of consciousness. The techniques included drugs, various forms of hypnosis, and even more extreme measures, such as those developed by Dr. Ewan Cameron in Montreal. Procedures known as psychic driving, which involves drastic sensory deprivation sessions in an effort to wipe the consciousness, clean and record new consciousness over the old, much the same way we would record over a used cassette tape. It is the sensory of modern-day Frankenstein, or a laboratory full of Frankensteins, and the monsters they made, monsters that wander the streets of our cities today. Quoting Peter Levenda, the complexity of the human experience is such that we can only wonder what trigger mechanisms exist in environment, on television, in newspapers and magazines, and even the internet, that suggests modes of behavior to those victims that are dangerous to themselves and to us. All of this has me thinking of the Aurora shooting, the theater shooting, as well as the kid Thomas Crooks, all these people, sleepers almost, who are triggered by some kind of, I've heard even the triggers are like the monarch butterfly, leopard print, and leopard print out here in Texas for the ladies is like camo for the dudes. Anyway, it would only be a matter of time before the mind control researchers began to scour the records of occultists, magicians, witches, voodoo priests, and Siberian shamans to isolate the techniques that were used since time immemorial to supplant a person's normal, comfortable, everyday consciousness and replace it with a powerful, all-knowing, and sometimes violent, and always deceptive alter personality, and to use those alters to uncover the action of deep memory. For MK Ultra was, at its core, an assault on the land of memory. the creation of new false memories, and the eradication of old dangerous ones. For intelligence purposes, in the search for the perfection, what was required of MKUltra was the ability to manipulate memory. But in exploring the mind and developing techniques for unlocking its secrets, the agency unknowingly tread on areas that have been the domain of religion and mysticism for thousands of years. When the CIA incorporated drugs into the program and bizarre sensory deprivation techniques, we had all the elements of a serious occult experience. Cults as disparate as the Eleusis in Greece, Tantra in India, Serbian shamanism, Native American shamanism, Taoism in China, Jewish Kabbalism, even the relatively modern phenomenon of European central ceremonial magic. As represented in the 20th century by the Golden Dawn, the OTO, and individuals such as Aleister Crowley, as mythologists such as Carl Jung, Mircea Eliade, and others have demonstrated, there is such a great deal of similarity in technology among these arcane practices, and that similarity exists for a reason. The arcane doctrine and methods of a discarded science are at the heart of this study because they reveal the mechanisms by which society in general and individuals in particular have been manipulated by forces beyond their comprehension. Again, quoting Peter Levenda's Sinister Forces, quote, magic was there when MKUltra began its search for the secrets of the paranormal and interviewed witches and wizards in America and beyond. Ceremonial magic begins with the basic premise that it's sometimes formulated as the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. A simple phrase with ominous implications. Magicians believe that connections or links exist between perceived phenomena, and that to operate on one's side of the link is to cause change to occur on the other. The magicians operate in the world of non-locality, a world where the force may be an object, a wave may be a particle, and everything in its immediate communication with everything else. We're getting into quantum physics. The magician pulls his strings surrounded by an aura of deniability, an aura created by Newtonian science. Since science states that what the magician does is impossible, the result of superstition and ignorance. There is no such thing as the mafia, stated J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, and the capos laughed. Mind control and magic. Not very far apart at all. Thus, the magician is at once an interrogator and interrogatee. He is the one in charge of manipulating and controlling the environment, but not for the effect it will have on someone else, but on himself alone. What the CIA has done in its interrogation manual, itself the product of MKUltra, is to separate the magician from the ultimate goal of its occultism, which is the kind of spiritual perfection and elated consciousness, and instead focus all the powers on occult teachings, techniques on an unwilling and informed subject, to manipulate him as well as the environment, to change the subject and transform him into something more useful to the interrogators and of mortal dangers to the subject's own people. It is, in the jargon of occultism, black magic, and black magic in the service of the state. The doors of perception had been opened not only by drugs like mescaline, LSD, psilocybin, but also by the seance, the shamans, and the secret ritual. All had become tools of the trade for elements of the CIA and their assault on memory and consciousness through the open doors of perception. And instead of letting the light in, they let the darkness out. Drugs, shamanism, and the occult, the dark domain of Charles Manson, of John Rawlings Rees, of the Nazi doctors, of Hollywood and the music industry, the CIA and MI6 initiation sessions. With psychedelics, they disturbed the sleep of ancient forces, and the world would never be the same again. Elimination by illumination. Psychological warfare, although in existence for centuries, was really a discovery of the Second World War. Korea the Philippines, Vietnam, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America. The roll call of psychological operations is long, for the most part classified. Taken individually, these psychological warfare operations may have had a succinct political purpose, as defined and identified by nameless men in gray flannel suits in the corridors of power, or by presidents and national security advisors to further their own hidden agendas. But they were manifestations of something deeper, a spiritual war, a war of worldviews, a war we are still fighting numbly into the second decade of the 21st century. And now we're into the fourth. By 1964, the use of the occult themes and rituals became an accepted part of psychological warfare planning. The Special Operations Research Office at American University prepared a paper at the request of the U.S. Army on witchcraft, sorcery, magic, and other psychological phenomena, and their implications on paramilitary operations in the Congo. The paper was authored by James R. Price and Paul Giardini. American University was no stranger to psychological warfare research, having seen the establishment there of the Bureau of Social Science Research in 1950. Its African studies of psychological warfare were underwritten by the Human Ecology Fund, an organization that was a front for the CIA's MKUltra program. Some of these people involved in the research were the same Nazis who years earlier escaped in the United States as part of Operation Paperclip. The relationship between the occult and the Nazis shouldn't surprise anyone who understands that the highest-ranking Nazis were contaminated with the ersatz paganism and popular occultism of the Thule-Gesellschaft variety, which had been absorbed into the SS with torchlight precision and runic chants. Operation Paperclip. As Lavenda writes in Sinister Forces, there had to have been a level at which the U.S. government leaders identified with the Nazis, or at least admired them. There had to have been a point at which the crimes of the Holocaust were considered a minor distraction, a kind of public relations nuisance that was overshadowed by the glamour of the perfectly run superstate of the Third Reich. There must have been an understanding that the ideologies of America and Nazi Germany were more alike than the ideologies of America and the Soviet Union. This is because there is just no other way to interpret what took place at the end of the war. Morally, what transpired can only be considered a war crime itself. Policymakers in Washington knew that the next major conflict would be fought between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was of utmost importance. It was of utmost importance to the United States. Nope. It was of utmost importance that top-level German scientists working on super-secret V1 and V2 projects, as well as nuclear weapons technology, be brought to American shores, out of reach of the Russians, and more importantly, perhaps, pressed into the service to the United States. Quote, to that end, several wartime intelligence operations were put in motion. The most famous one was Operation Paperclip. Most people who have heard of Paperclip assume that it was a program to bring Nazi scientists to the United States to assist the space program. However, there was much more to Paperclip and to subsequent Nazi recruitment than rocket science. Nazi medical personnel were also recruited, as well as psychological warfare experts, and the Gehlen organizations, spies, assassins, and saboteurs. The Paperclip story is long and very complex. It involves the alphabet soup of intelligence agencies and programs. From CROCAS, which is Central Registry of War Crimes and Security Suspects, to CIC, SIS, OSS, CIA, JIOA, and many more. It deals with dozens of countries, their central intelligence agencies, armies, political parties, Roman Catholic Church, and criminal justice systems. By the time Paperclip was over, an entire division of Ukrainian Waffen SS, as well as thousands of Nazi scientists, many of them accused war criminals who had participated in some of the war's worst atrocities, had managed to find home in the United States, South America, and the Middle East. Whatever the morality of the recruiting of German scientists, there was another dimension to the experiments that had gone virtually unnoticed by researchers due to the near lack of documentation and the lack of living witnesses. Excuse me. The evidence that does exist is largely circumstantial, but much of it can be found in the captured German documents section of the National Archives, and then collated with later testimony that turns up in memoirs, biographies of the war years and its aftermath. The first evidence we have that anything like a mind control program existed within the Third Reich is the memories of Himmler's astrologer, Wilhelm Wolff, who talks about the Nazis' desire to create a program within the Reich to duplicate the mental state of the Japanese soldiers. A human being willing and eager to risk his life without question for his country, and the Chinese communist, human wave trooper who would rush unthinkingly into certain slaughter. Thus, Paperclip scientists were involved with military slaughter. With military and the CIA mind control programs, such as Friedrich Hoffmann, a Nazi chemist who advised the CIA on matters relating to psychotropic substances used for brainwashing. The Germans were among the first to study the use of psychological warfare. Became inextricably intertwined with propaganda and communications, and eventually bled over into acts that can be considered terrorism: assassinations, sabotage, torture, and interrogations. The domain of Tavistock Institute of Human Relations as psychological warfare became more sophisticated, and the intelligence services at once more creative and more demanding. New techniques were developed and virtually codified. All of these techniques share an ontological purpose: to manipulate perceptions and to recreate reality. Once the Pandora's box was opened, there was no closing it again. The temptation was too great for those who wanted to play God. There was the next best thing. One could play with the elements of creation in such a way that magical transformations would take place. As the men of the OSS, CIA, military intelligence, and with Tavistock's oversight, developed from the armchair scholars that most of them were, before the war years, into soldiers fighting on the front lines of the Cold War. They became, in the very real sense, magicians. The CIA mind control projects themselves represented an assault on consciousness and reality that has not been seen in history since the age of the philosopher kings and their court alchemists. Mind control. In an extraordinary book, The Secret Societies in Psychological Warfare, Michael Hoffman writes, quote, "Looking into the subject of mind control, one finds that the scope is wide and methods used are sophisticated. Mind control traces its origin to religious institutional use by priesthoods. Techniques of mind control developed in our Western culture were often field tested by Jesuits, certain Vatican groups, and various mystery religions, secret societies, and Masonic organizations. Methods tested during the Inquisition were refined by Dr. Joseph Mengele during the reign of the Third Reich. Soon afterwards, a mind control project called marionette programming, imported from Nazi Germany, was revived under the new name Project Monarch. The best component of the Monarch program is the sophisticated manipulation of the mind, using extreme trauma to induce multiple personality disorder, MPD, known as dissociative identity disorder, or DID. In public testimonies submitted to the President's Committee on Radiation, there are amazing allegations of severe torture and inhumane programs foisted upon Americans and other citizens, especially as children. This wedding of the purely psychological with the purely physiological became the cornerstone of subsequent intelligence agencies' programs designed to uncover the secrets of the mind, the interface between the lump of gray matter we call brain and the great beyond we call reality. Chill. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. Can you lay down? You can sit with me. Nope, don't lick me. Cat poop eating. The CIA conspiracy. As Peter Kuski writes in The Shaping of the Anglo-American by War, the Anglo-American SS. Look at this. It was real hard for me to not read that. Anyway, according to the OSS's assessment staff's post-war report, Assessment of Men, it was Dr. John Rawlings Rees and his Tavistock crew at the British War Office Selection Board who contacted the London office of the OSS to suggest that the Special Warfare Organization adopt Tavistock's selection and training methods. It was Rees who devised the OSS brainwashing election procedures, and Lewin helped refine them. It was also Rockefeller-sponsored Rees who devised a U.S. financier-promoted counterinsurgency project. The development of the CIA establishment has been essentially directed to a systematic infiltration of all principles of all principal existing institutions, an infiltration which is a deliberate preparatory deployment aimed at the establishment of a quasi-legal fascist takeover with the help of some of the leading families of America. Many of these future leaders of the CIA came from America's ruling families, from a never-ending pool of bankers and industrialists, such as DuPont, Vanderbilt, Bryce, Mellon, Archibald, Morgan, and Roosevelt. Can you let her out by chance? Will you let her out? Will you let her out? Okay. Thank you. For example, Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, Quentin Roosevelt, was an OSS Special Operations Officer in China, as was Winston Churchill's cousin, Raymond Guest. J.P. Morgan's two sons, Junius and Henry S., were in charge of laundering of all the OSS funds and the counterfeiting of all OSS identity papers. The Rockefeller connections. One of the people closely associated with the Rockefeller clan was John Gardner, an OSS psychologist in charge of personal assessment. For over 3 decades, he headed Rockefeller's most important organizations: the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Carnegie Corporation, Education and Welfare Departments, and Common Cause, a nationwide, independent, nonpartisan organization for those Americans who want to help in the rebuilding of the nation. In fact, Common Cause was a front for a cabal to impeach and remove Nixon from the White House, on the one hand, and install David's brother Nelson Rockefeller as the president on the other hand. That makes me think of a secret recording of Nixon and Graham, somebody, an old preacher, talking about what we also discussed in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Arthur Goldberg, another one of Rockefeller's loyal servants, future U.S. Secretary of Labor and Supreme Court Justice under President John F. Kennedy, was placed in charge of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the labor desk. Along with Tristan Lewin, Goldberg would push counterinsurgency as a method of labor movement control. What? The list, I have this much left. You're so supportive and loving. I love that. The list of Rockefeller supporters and representatives in key positions is a who's who amongst the nation builders of the XX century, the 20th century. Alan Dulles, a former director, or Dulles, a former director of Rockefeller Standard Oil Corporation, was OSS Chief of Secret Intelligence of Europe and later head of the CIA. Dulles, a prototypical Eastern establishment figure, is a perfect example of the invisible confluence of fascist interests around the creation of a new imperial dominion, controlled by Rockefeller through CIA Tavistock corporate interests. For instance, Dulles was put in charge of the CIA's Bluebird Mind Control project, which he changed to artichoke because he was fond of the vegetable. Furthermore, Allen and his brother John Foster were senior partners at Rockefeller Standard Oil Chief's law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, a notorious CIA front with links to the most important financial houses in Wall Street. Sullivan and Cromwell's twin was a German law firm of Albert and Westrick, who is simultaneously Hitler's financial agent, and Abwehr spymaster in the United States, and Sullivan and Cromwell's German representative. As a result, the Dulles law firm acquired 3 major German concerns as Standard Oil cartel partners. Among them was the murderous IG Farbenindustrie, which was, with the Krupp Works, the principal user of concentration camp slave labor for the Nazis' Blitzkrieg economy. I don't do well with German words, I'm sorry. Hi. Hi, sweetheart. The Dulles family had long and extensive ties to the Nazi underground and had been laundering Nazi money for decades. Both played major political roles throughout the 1920s and the 1930s in the rearming of Germany by night. The rearming. Oh my God. The rearming of Germany by night policy premised on using the Wehrmacht as a weapon against the Soviet Union and European working class. Alan Dulles was in an intelligence position in Switzerland during the First World War, developing the contacts and the network he used as the years went by. He would be one of the key people working the Byzantine machinations of post-war Operation Paperclip that formed the real structure of resurgent fascism, of what became known in the intelligence community simply as blowback. While Allen was employed in Switzerland, his brother John Foster was working at the State Department in Washington. Their uncle, ultra-conservative Robert Lansing, was President Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State. The Dulles brothers actively courted Nazi officials in the 1930s, as did the Rockefeller and Wall Street corporate interests, such as Ford Motor Company and IBM, and helped them escape after the war, especially when Alan Dulles became CIA director beginning in 1953. Thank you, Lady Drea. Dulles's chief of counterintelligence, James Jesus Angleton, or James Jesus Angleton, later the CIA's Vatican liaison, and Frank Wisner, who oversaw Gehlen Organization's Special Forces in 1952 through 53, would be involved with various secret off-the-books operations, among them Odessa, which helped to relocate Nazis into Peron's Argentina, and Die Spine, or the Spider, a loose designation of the post-war remnants of the Nazis' secret police and covert intelligence apparatus, whose U.S. point man was a Rockefeller Republican Party supporter, Harold Keith Thompson. We'll come back to Die Spinne, or Spine. Spinne, I guess so. spiders or spinners a bit later in the report. In 1945, Dulles, along with former Gestapo OSS agent Hans Bernd Gisevius, was accused by the U.S. Treasury Department of laundering Nazi funds from Hungary into Switzerland. The investigation was eventually dropped when the U.S. State Department claimed jurisdiction. If anyone still has any doubts about a close proximity of the Rockefeller clan to the Nazis, in 1945, President Truman fired Nelson Rockefeller for his role in engineering the creation of Peron's fascist regime, which provided a safe haven for more than 100,000 Nuremberg criminals delivered by Allen Dulles from Europe. In his national bestseller, Blowback, author Christopher Simpson wrote, after World War II, Nazi emigres were given CIA subsidies to build a far-right wing power base in the U.S. These Nazis assumed prominent positions in the Republican Party's ethnic outreach committees. These Nazis did not come to America as individuals, but as part of an organized group with fascist political agendas. The Nazi agenda did not die along with Adolf Hitler. It moved to America, or part of it did, and joined the far right of the Republican Party. From Richard Helms, a future CIA director and Dulles liaison man, to Wehrmacht intelligence chief General Reinhard Gehlen, to CIA Director William Colby, who received his training as the OSS Special Operations Officer from the SOE in London. The list of interlocking Rockefeller Nazi Tavistock interests is endless. The Tavistock techniques of gang, counter-gang, sabotage, and political assassinations Colby learned at SOE Special Training School were the very methods he later used in directing the CIA's Project Phoenix in South Vietnam, which included the mass assassination atrocities at My Lai. It is one thing to generate a conspiracy during a period of aggravated wartime crisis. It is another matter altogether to sustain and extend its dominion throughout the period of apparent peacetime normalcy. As things settled down at the end of the war, World War II, the Rockefeller CIA set about to expand its apparatus. In the process, they would try to permeate and dissolve the old order to emerge as the hardcore of a new imperial dominion. The Tavistock and the Rician method that the class war should be waged with weapons that affect morale more than they take life has become, in the post-World War period, the primary weapon systems of the Rockefeller forces, including their own covert arm, the Central Intelligence Agency. Reading this after reading the protocols definitely bolsters the need for political independence to kind of take over. So with the Zionists taking over the liberalist wing, and the Nazis having taken over back in the day, I wonder how it progressed. But the right wing, I mean, the left and right wing are a bird of nefarious intent, So, for example, in 1977, the U.S. Senate Church Committee investigation exposed criminal activities by the CIA. Quoting Peter Kuski, among the most damning revelations was the CIA's 25-year history of secret experimentation with mind-altering drugs, mass psychological manipulation, North Korean-style brainwashing and torture techniques, under the rubric of Operation MKUltra and other programs. The New York Times ran a front-page story singling out Dr. Louis West as one of the CIA's top MKUltra mind destroyers. The Times obtained a West-authored memo advocating the use of LSD in social control. The memo, the paper reported, read in part, this method, foreseen by Aldous Huxley in A Brave New World, 1932, has the governing element employing drugs selectively to This method, foreseen by Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, has the governing element employing drugs selectively to manipulate the governed in various ways. In fact, it may be more convenient and perhaps even more economical to keep the growing number of chronic drug users, especially of hallucinogens, fairly isolated and also out of the labor market. And that reminds me also of that Silicon Valley surge in using hallucinogenics. With its millions of unemployed, to society, the commandeers with the hallucinogenic drugs are probably less bothersome and less expensive if they are living apart than if they are engaging in alternative modes of expressing their alienation, such as active, organized, vigorous political protest and dissent. So the left wing uses and leans on protesting, and the right wing eliminates it. Earlier, that is shortly after the war, Rees gave a speech in New York to a group of military and civilian psychiatrists. If we prepare to come out into the open and to attack the social and national problems of our day, then we must have the shock troops, and these cannot be provided by psychiatry based wholly in institutions. We must have mobile teams of psychiatrists who are free to move around and make contact with the local area. The overall theme of all of Rees's known work is the development of the use of psychiatry as a weapon of the ruling class. Rees's 22-point program for the application of military methods to civilian life, presented in his lectures that constituted the book of Shaping Psychiatry by War, became an Anglo-American SS Bible. From Vienna in 1956, Rees, under the cover of his World Federation for Mental Health, and Frank Wisner, the CIA Deputy Director and Chief of Special Operations, coordinated the counterinsurgency popularity known as the Hungarian Revolution. Rees emphasized the value of overt and covert operations through the use of military as a model of improvements in civil affairs institutions. One of these covert operations was the D-SPINNY network, the Spider Network. Through the period of the Cold War, the Spider Network, I'm going to just say the Spider Network instead of the German saying because I don't like it. I don't like always questioning my pronunciation. So the Spider Network was employed in a covert, corporate, and CIA intelligence spiritual crusade to rock back the Iron Curtain, such as the paramilitary operation known as the Hungarian Uprising in 1956. After the 1963 assassination of JFK, the Spider was deactivated in favor of the fascism with a human face policy, championed by such left fascist elements as the Institute for Policy Studies. Executive Intelligence Review on the Spider operations makes an interesting observation of Cold War operations. The Hungarian Revolt of 1956 was the Spider's most famous. Amid a full deployment of British Fabian and similar operatives to destabilize Eastern Europe's communist parties following Khrushchev's de-Stalinization speech, the Gehlen Organization's special forces, comprised of former Waffen-SS and Brandenburg Division cadre, covertly invaded Hungary and linked up with old fascists from the Arrow Cross Party, which the Nazis used during the occupation to conduct a wave of sabotage and assassinations. It was these elements which formed the core of the so-called Hungarian freedom fighters. The command structure extended down through scenario design and policy direction. The command structure extended down through scenario design and policy direction at the levels of National Security Council, the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, the Hudson Institute, and the Hoover Institute of War. In the end, the CIA directed liberation of Hungary, failed because when push comes to shove, the Soviet Union was willing to undertake a nuclear war to preserve their hold over their satellite states. The Americans, though rhetorically committed to liberation, were not willing to fight World War III to achieve that objective. Among the Nazis laundered through Alan Dulles' Operation Sunrise and Operation Paperclip for post-war use were SS Untersturmführer Paul Dickhoff, who would serve as Interpol's head between 1968 and 1972. No. Interpol is an international private policy agency which functioned as a coordinating body for the Spider's terrorism. In fact, it should be out there. Oh. A little known fact about Interpol is that it grew out of anticipation of the First World War, set up by the House of Rothschilds in Vienna in 1923. The family felt it needed a special intelligence organization to watch over the interests of bankers, who were financing both sides of the war. In order to not make things look too suspicious, they called on Prince Albert I of Monaco to invite lawyers, judges, and police officers from several countries to discuss international cooperation against crime. I can't wait till I have my own space to do this.
Are you?
I am still alive.
We're just getting snacks.
And I hear you giggling up there. It's joyful.
Hi, Kiki.
It's the kitty. What do you got on your face, my cat?
Hi,
Come on.
everyone.
Hi from my boys. Oh, I don't know where I was. Through the period of the Cold War, the Spider Network, I read that. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about this.
You're gonna get your own.
Go ahead. Love you.
Love you.
You might as well get dressed, Hank. Executive Intelligence Review on the Spider operations makes an interesting observation. Nope. Okay. Sorry. Where am I at? So at 47 minutes, I mess up. Maybe I'll go and cut that out. With the abundance of proof, still, most people would find it difficult to accept that the CIA is an adjunct of the Rockefeller-led organization that, along with Tavistock Institute, is working diligently to change the paradigm of modern society. If we are to believe the United States federal statutes and other myths concocted for the benefit of the credulous, the CIA is merely a key agency of the National Security Council, working with various intelligence agencies. The Defense Department, the Treasury, and the FBI. The reality is quite different. The CIA apparatus has penetrated every key organization, including think tanks, universities, non-governmental organizations, and foundations. My kitty. For example, most major universities are either entirely or substantially branches of the CIA. At the University of Michigan, we have the most notorious example of the Institute for Social Research, calling its work a telescope of society. The IRS are notorious disciples of John Reese and Tavistock Institute of Social Research. Then there is Harvard's Russian Institute, like Columbia's, but also Harvard's Psychology Department is a covert CIA operation run for many years by another Reesian psychopath, B.F. Skinner. Principal Skinner, wasn't he based off of that character? So Skinner, a psychologist who asserts that men have no minds. Massachusetts Institute of Technology has also been a flourishing nest of CIA activity. The University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School was home of Eric Trist, a Rockefeller-sponsored Reesian fascist who directed a series of social work projects. Cornell, Berkeley, and Stanford are also notorious CIA fronts. Through control of governmental and major foundations, The CIA has been able to have a say not only what programs are funded, but to control the selection of instructors who move into the controlling positions. As, as honest academic, look at how handsome he is. Academicians are weeded out and hounded into retirement. Honest, look at this word right here. Oh, there it is. Academicians. So honest teachers are weeded out and hounded into retirement. Then there's the case of CIA, what do you call them? Teachers at a stinking college. Thank you for your grace and for understanding. Look at his working on it face. Love him. Oop, where is he? Anyway, then there's the case of the CIA control of private foundations. For example, the Rockefeller Foundation was established by the family on April 24th, 1913. This statement of purpose cynically read, to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. My puppy wants to be out front with her dad, and you can hear her in the background fussing. Another powerful Rockefeller-controlled foundation is Ford Foundation, whose head was a Rockefeller stooge and CIA operative, McGeorge Bundy of the CIA Bundy family. Interesting, the Bundy Ranch. I wonder if that has any relation. McGeorge's father, Harvey, married a Lowell, one of the wealthiest American families, and then under Henry Stimson at the War Department, after helping Stimson write his memoirs, Bundy joined Richard Bissell, his professor at Yale, during his undergraduate days in Europe, to help implement the Marshall Plan. When Bissell became head of special operations at the CIA, Bundy went with him. Bissell later would become a Ford Foundation director and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. What's more, William Bundy, McGeorge's older brother, was not only one of the most powerful men in the CIA, but was also a member of the Rockefeller-controlled Council on Foreign Relations and an editor of CFR's Foreign Affairs magazine. Interesting, and I keep thinking about it. My dad went to McGeorge School of Law. He's getting impatient that I've been going live so much, but we've got one more page to go, and I appreciate y'all being here with me. Oh, where was I? Oh, the Rockefellers also have interlocking control over the leading, most powerful foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. Leading directors of the Carnegie Foundations have for decades belonged to the Rockefeller Coordinated Council on Foreign Relations. In addition, 12 of the 17 members of the Carnegie Board of Trustees are also associates of various Rockefeller financial institutions, including Richard Beatty, chairman of Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett LLP law firm, a notorious CIA front, and Susan Hochfeld, president of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Another Rockefeller supporter is a current president of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Jessica Tuchman Matthews, who is also a regular member of the powerful Bilderberg organization. And this author wrote The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. Maybe we'll do that one next. I'm not sure. The Knowing Grin, nope. All right. Carnegie is a foreign police think tank interlocked with other Rockefeller think tanks and foundations such as Ford, Hoover's Institute, and Hudson Institute, whose senior fellow, Marie-Josée Kravis, is also a member of the Bilderberg Group. When I think of this chapter, I think of Mona Lisa, or rather the smile of Mona Lisa. Her grin is the grin of men and a few women who engage in the most vicious forms of psychological warfare against the human race. the knowing grin of men who commit crimes against humanity. In this chapter, we have exhumed the corpse of Tavistock's great architect, John Rawlings Rees, and a few of his most loyal henchmen, tracing the living trail of mind control and ritual killing, and placing them at the feet of some of our most important puppet masters. Just the phrase ritual killing reminds me of Charlie Kirk and how he was executed in an arena, an outdoor arena, in the shape of a menorah, but who Candace described as a pentagram. Let there be light, he said, and so is what I say. Let there be light. The skeleton key turned once, twice, 3 times. The door was pulled ajar with a squeak. Something moved, a shadow, then it was gone. There is blood on our hands, and there are documents. This is history. You can't have one without the other. Blood, documents, guilt, innocence, knowledge, ignorance, frustration, fear. But you can't know history unless you know fear. You can't know history unless you feel the pulse of life under your fingers, unless you can stare the guns in the face, unless you can stand in the prisons and the death camps and feel the gaze of informers and spies and soldiers on your back in foreign countries, and on your own doorstep, your own driveway. History is not to be absent, but to become absent, to be someone and then go away, leaving traces. The rest is only bookkeeping. The world has always been like this, of course. It has always been run by people, superstitious, religious, fearful, paranoid, ugly, hateful, murderous people. That is nothing new. But at a specific point in the country, we took a step further. With JFK, we opened Pandora's box and the black box of human consciousness. We flipped open the lid and rummaged around inside, and we loosed monsters on the earth. Monsters who feed on human flesh, who drink the nectar of human souls. Quote, with what we have seen here, one comes to the conclusion that there is nowhere to go, no one to trust. Everything we know, we see through a prism of a lens, cold and calculating. For what else is a camera but a special device for transforming and viewing our world? As any photographer who has slipped beneath the dark cloth and focused a portion of the world upon their ground glass can tell you, the eloquent mirror of the lens inverts and reverses the world optically, mathematically, and magically. As we pose our subjects with view through the lens, we create our own special world, and emerging from the dark cloth are an array of characters who made the 20th century their own. JFK, Rockefeller, Rees, the little gray men in flannel suits with CIA badges, their Tavistock companions, and all sorts of unsavory, crazy Nazis. It is the Wizard of Oz meets MK Ultra. We live in the most at the abnormal, even paranormal of times. And unless we heed the reality that underlies the everyday, our failure to connect the dots will allow our denial to persist. With JFK front and center, and now Charlie Kirk, we are awash, not in the coincidental, but in the subliminal, and the possibility that the mythic battle between demonic and angelic forces are yet being recreated on planet Earth. We could end this by saying we are not in Kansas anymore. Unfortunately, might I say, paraphrasing Mephistopheles, why this is Kansas. Why this is Kansas, nor am I out of it. Chapter 2, I love how that ended, because it was reading there like stereo instructions, but those are the dots that need to be connected. This is Lemmy, by the way. Lemmy and Billy love each other. There's also a bunny that roams, and his name is Bingo, but I call him Bunzo. Anyway, Book club. This has been an hour. I thought it would be less than that, but it's thick reading. It's a book worth going over, and let there be light being the mantra of today. The truth is winning. Thank you for being here with me, and I'll see you tomorrow with chapter 3.